Hello again, everybody. Gary Ferman and Matt Shodell here, and today we are talking about potential second-team deficiencies on the defensive side of the football. And yesterday we talked about offense. Today we're talking about defense. And talking about defense when you're talking about second team is not as difficult, in my opinion, as it might have been on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball is where Miami clearly does not quite have the same amount of depth as it has on offense. So, Matt Shodell, let's dive right into this. Let's start with the defensive line. Now, you're hoping that in terms of the front four, that you have a couple of proven playmakers in Leonard Taylor and Akeem Messidor. Okay, that has to be the case. I would have a separate debate, which we won't do right now, on whether Leonard Taylor is a proven playmaker, because I personally would like to see him show up more than once every 10 plays. I would like to see him become an every down player this year. I think it's one of the variables that will determine how successful Miami is this year. But for the purposes of our conversation here, we'll assume that Leonard Taylor and Akeem Messidor are two proven guys. And the question is, who's going to start alongside them? Right now at defensive tackle, I think we would have to call the front runner Branson Dean over right now over Harrison Hunt at the other defensive tackle position. And I think Nigel Kelly and Jafari Harvey are going to have quite a battle at defensive end. So let's say that it goes the way that I think it's going to go, Matt, and Branson Dean wins the starting job at tackle over Harrison Hunt, and Nigel Kelly wins the starting job at end over Jafari Harvey. Do you have concerns about a second-team unit that is headed up by, say, Harrison Hunt, Ahmad Moten, Thomas Gore, maybe even Anthony Campbell, if they can figure out what to do with him coming out of the portal? And then, of course, like I said, Harvey. I mean, are you concerned about a second team that maybe includes that group of guys?
Well, let me preface this by saying I think the defensive line is the strength. If you look at defensive line, linebackers, and defensive backs as three separate units, I think defensive line is the strength of the defense. And it is sort of scary because, Branson Dean comes from Purdue, and he's okay. He's pretty good. He's not great. He's pretty good. Which is fine. And like you said, you got Leonard Taylor, who I think is going to be really, really good. First-round NFL draft pick status type thing. Obviously, defensive end. Akeem Messidor is a big-time playmaker as well. So the question marks are really after those two guys, because I don't consider Branson Dean at their level. And I think Nigel Kelly could have a breakout year for sure. But again, we haven't seen it yet. So, this is where Miami has to get back to, where these guys who you just don't know how they're going to be, they just have breakout seasons. And that's called development. And it's something that we have not seen at Miami. So we need to see, if this is going to be a 9 or 10 win team, you need to see some of these guys that have been here for a year or a year essentially, because that's when Mario Cristobal's taken them over, see them make these jumps up, right? Because it used to be, other reporters used to talk to me about this, how players actually would get worse, which is hard to believe. They get worse over their Miami career. And we need to hit that level where they're getting better. So Nigel Kelly can make that jump up from year 1 to year 2, which is a huge jump up normally if you have great coaching. He's going to be really, really good. He's got all the requisite skills. But the caveat to that, when we talk about depth, you mentioned Anthony Campbell, right? Like that to me is the red flag, because these coaches, I'm not going to pretend like Gary or I know more than the coaches do about college football. If we did, we'd be doing their job. But they saw what they saw depth-wise, and they said, let's take a Louisiana Monroe backup. Okay, Anthony Campbell was a backup. He didn't start at Louisiana Monroe. He was a backup. But he's 6'7", 240, 50 pounds, whatever.
He doesn't look like a backup when you look at him. I mean, this guy looks to be like a prototypical NFL offensive tackle, quite honestly. Don't be surprised if they don't move him to offense.
Well, regardless, the point is he wasn't recruited much out of high school. He didn't do anything in college so far. But they're like, you know what? We'll just see what we get. They did the same thing with Thomas Gore. Let's see what we get. And Thomas Gore, quite frankly, didn't work out. He doesn't look like he can help them at all at defensive tackle. I'm not sure Anthony Campbell can either. Now, I mean, you say how they look. Yeah, guys passed the look test, right? There was a recruit a few years ago who fooled recruiting services into thinking he was an actual recruit and had all these offers, and they created some sort of a one of those profiles for him on one of these sites, listing all his offers. Did a story with him. Some site did this, and he wasn't even a real recruit. He's just some guy who was 6'4" and 230 pounds and looked really good, but he ran a 5'8" 40. So just because you look the part, there's a reason this guy was a backup. If he was so great at Louisiana Monroe last year, I think he probably would have started. Those coaches sort of know what they're doing too, even though some people may not think so. So the point is, it's a red flag. When you have to take a guy at a lower level program who didn't even start and do really well there, it's a red flag. It's basically telling us that the Miami coaches are very concerned at defensive tackle. And I'm not going to sit here and say otherwise. I think they have a good reason to be concerned at defensive tackle. I think they have a major problem at defensive tackle. I think Darrell Jackson's departure took them hugely by surprise. Very difficult to get defensive tackles that are of any ability in the portal because they're pursued by everybody. The great defensive tackles are very, very difficult to find. You have to get them in recruiting pretty much, unless you want to spend a fortune in NIL. And, this is where they're at, right? So they have really good defensive ends. The way that I would fix it if I'm them is Akeem Messidor and Ruben Bain are going to be playing inside a lot, because they can penetrate the backfield. They can use their quickness to get past lower interior offensive linemen. And you just got to hope that these guys don't get their hands on those smaller guys and shove them out of the play, and the guy's gone up the middle for 100 yards. I was talking to a big booster the other day about this, and he was asking about the defensive tackles, and I said, listen, I think the biggest problem Miami's going to have this year when they're on defense is delayed draw plays, because I think that bigger offensive linemen are going to be pushing these guys off the ball. I think when you do have a Messidor or a Bain inside helping out, their intent, like their goal, is to get to the quarterback and get in the offensive backfield. And those delayed draws work really, really well when your interior guys can push them outside just a little bit and create a crease. And I think that's going to be, if you guys want to look back at this video in 3 months, and maybe the defense was great, maybe it wasn't. If it wasn't great, you're going to say Matt Shodell called it, that the big problem Miami had this year was stopping the draw up the middle, the delayed draw up the middle, and that's how a lot of teams got touchdowns, long runs, whatever it is, because I think that's going to be the real problem for this team.
Not likely going to happen. There's the chances of somebody sitting back here a couple months from now saying Matt Shodell was right is very, very.
By the way, the same booster said I was right about several other things, so I'm not going to get into because they're not public consumption, but he knows they're right because he's a big booster. So I'm not going to get into it, but I'm telling you right now, that's my concern. Will it come true? Yes, unfortunately, because I'm always right, but you can still hope it won't. Maybe in an alternate reality, I'll be wrong once in a while.
All right, let's talk about one other thing as it pertains to the defensive line. You do have a lot of bodies there. You have, we didn't even talk about Chance Williams. We didn't talk about Jaden Wayne, the freshman, Collins Achimapong. I mean, you can go on and on.
Yeah.
Moss.
There's 60 in defensive linemen, and we're talking about 3 or 4 that are any good right now. So that can help right now.
There is a lot of bodies there. Jacob Lichtenstein. So, would you call backups at defensive line a deficiency? I mean, it's a difficult question because of the number of bodies that you have there.
I mean, I think they have 4 starters. I think they have 1 to 2 decent backup defensive linemen and 10 fourth teamers. That's just how I feel right now in terms of this year. Okay, I'm not talking about in 3 years or 2 years, some of these young guys won't be great. I'm talking about this year. If you want to view Miami as a 10-win team or a championship team, they've got 4 okay, they got an okay starting line to me overall. They got a couple of guys that could be backups, probably Jafari Harvey, and I actually think that a guy we haven't mentioned, Joshua Horton. I think he'll be probably in the rotation at defensive tackle, as scary as that is for a true freshman.
True freshman.
And, I think he's going to be really good. But aside from those guys, everyone else to me,
it did not go through spring practice.
Correct, he wasn't here. But to me, the rest of the guys are fourth teamers on a championship team. It's like I've covered championship teams here. I was here, believe it or not, covering the 2001 championship team, and so I know what it should look like. And these guys, 10 of these guys would have been walk-ons on that team on the defensive line. That's just a fact. It's true.
You are so brutal. Let me tell you something. I pray that these guys are too busy working out to watch this show because, You're brutal. I mean, you're just brutal. Like, you are a confidence destroyer. Your fan club loves you. Oh, Matt brings honesty.
People don't you understand? Still, you don't understand. Expect the worst, and then you'll be pleasantly surprised. It's a positive thing to be negative.
Equating 2/3 of the scholarship defensive linemen at the University of Miami to walk-ons, to fourth-team walk-ons.
Yeah, I don't need guys that aren't going to help me.
That is brutal. BRUTAL.
Well, there's gonna be 2 true freshmen that should redshirt. Obviously Ruben Bain and Joshua Horton, I think, can contribute. And then, Cyrus Moss still has to gain 50 pounds. I'm not going to name everybody, but like there's projects that, Ahmad Moten's a project, that they have a bunch of juniors on the team, and the only ones that are going to contribute, that I think will contribute at a high level would be Taylor, Messidor, and maybe Harvey. Harrison Hunt hasn't lived up to anything. The other guys you can look at, 2 of them are transfers. And the seniors are Lichtenstein and Branson Dean, and I'll include Branson Dean as a starter, but he's like just okay. To me, he's the number 4 out of the 4 starting defensive linemen. I mean, if you think, Gary, that this is like that the other guys out of those 6 guys would be on that team in 2001, I want to have some of the gummies that you're hiding in your basement, because like I am not on the same ethereal plane as you.
All right, let's talk linebackers for a second, because this one is really problematic to me. All right, I like what we saw from Francisco Mayagoa, in the spring. I think he is going to be a very good player, but I don't think that there's a lot of proven at all other than him. I mean, you pulled KJ Cloyd out of the transfer portal, Corey Flagg coming back. Wesley Basaint has not, been able to make the move and pick up things the way that it was hoped. So he's now a question mark coming into the season. Keandra Smith. I mean, you got some good-looking freshmen in Marcellus Pulliam, Malik Bryant. Popo Aguirre looks really, really good. But you're not going to be counting on them out of the gate here this season. I don't know, Matt. I think that there are justifiable deficiencies here at the linebacker position where your degree of negativity can have a party.
Again, we're not talking about the starters, okay? The offensive starters, I think, are going to do great. The defensive starters, I think, will be average. So we're talking about depth. So I'm not being negative. I'm being a realist. The depth isn't good. Mario Cristobal will tell you the depth isn't good. It's not a secret. It's why he took KJ Cloyd at linebacker. It's why he took Anthony Campbell at defensive lineman. These guys were backups coming in. They were backups. KJ Cloyd's been a backup for 4 years at Louisville, and now he's here. I mean, like, I'm not going to make stuff up and be like, oh, the depth is fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, before the season, anyone could say that, and fans won't get upset because everything's great, and they'll forget you said it when everything falls apart. But the reality of the situation is they took KJ Cloyd because they have no depth, and they're just hoping that he's a veteran. He's worked with the linebackers coach before. He sort of knows what's expected. Hard worker. You can get some reps out of him. But it's just so obvious when they take guys like Cloyd and Campbell that they're somewhat desperate for help. It's the only reason you take backups at other programs like Louisiana Monroe and Louisville, longtime backup, because you're saying these guys can help us. The fact that those guys who weren't good enough to help those other programs in real time as starters are good enough to help at Miami, it tells you where Miami's program is right now. And again, I'm not being negative. I want this program to be a championship program. They need to have guys, depth guys, like in the old days, that are championship players. And across the board, depth-wise, like other than the true freshmen that you can point to and maybe a couple of redshirt freshmen, you're not seeing sophomores, juniors, and seniors where you're going like, yeah, they got a ton of guys behind those starters in that sophomore and junior class. They're going to step up when these seniors are gone and when these redshirt juniors are gone. And, they're going to be even better the next year. Like in 2001 or even in the late 90s, whatever, like there were guys that were backups where you're like, that guy's going to be an NFL player, and he would redshirt, Now it's maybe that guy will be an NFL player and he's starting, like Samson Okunlola, Francis Mamigoa. If you're like have an NFL body right now and you're a true freshman, you're starting at Miami. And that's not how it used to be. And you could say, oh, but the training's different now and everything's different now. But at the end of the day, the best players are going to play. And if you don't have the great players behind those best players ready to step up when they're hurt or the following year, you're going to be in trouble. And right now, there's a reason Mario's taken 26 transfers the last 2 years, because he says this depth on this roster that I was given is terrible. And he's going to have to shed a ton more people next year too. He got to kick off 15 of the current players if he wants to sign a 25-player class. He'll do it. And there's plenty of scraps to get rid of, because this is what we're talking about. Like, there's just not the depth that you need at a level that Mario Cristobal wants to see. And it's a huge rebuilding process. It's going to take multiple years, obviously, because it was last year and it's going to be again this year, heading into next year, where he's got to jettison a bunch more guys. And that's okay. Like I've been saying all along, 2024, 2025, those are the years you should be targeting as a Miami fan, and enjoy anything that happens great this year. That'll be awesome. But like, if you want to win an ACC or compete for an ACC, you're talking about 2024 or 2025. That's not negative. That's realism. If you don't want to believe it, then go into Gary Ferman's imagination and live in the Azubi world.
Here we go. Well, I'm gonna set you up once more, Matt, because I'm gonna switch to cornerback, where again, I mean, look at the arrivals that came through the portal here. All of them, really. Devontae Brown, Darryl Porter, Jadaeus Richard, Jaden Davis, Demetrius Freeney. Man, it's like, how bad has the recruiting been at the University of Miami at cornerback, to where, you got Corey Couch trying like hell to be the slot corner. He's going to have to compete against all those other guys and prove his worth. But man, how bad has the cornerback recruiting been going back at Miami, to where you've had to fill the whole position at the transfer portal? And now, as for the purposes of our conversation here, do you feel, and we probably don't have a definitive answer on this, we're hoping the answer would be yes, but do you feel that with these 5 guys coming in from the portal, that the depth is now sufficient at cornerback to where you can feel good about it going into the season?
Well, first of all, five of the 10 guys that are defensive backs, safeties or otherwise, are transfer arrivals, whether this year or last year. Last year was Darryl Porter Jr., the others were all this year. And one of those guys, Brian Ballum, tried to leave, and they begged him to come back, so he came back at safety. But again, you see these red flags, like we talked about. It's okay to look for red flags. Okay, Anthony Campbell was a red flag when they took him in the second portal on the defensive line. KJ Cloyd was a red flag at linebacker when they took him in the second portal window after the spring, saying, "Oh my gosh, look what we had in the spring. We need help." And you got a couple more red flags at defensive back, at cornerback specifically, when Miami went out and got a JUCO guy, Demetrius Freeney, and another portal guy in this. Actually, I'm sorry, they took 3 guys, right, in the second window, and Jadaeus Richard and Jaden Davis, right? So they took 3 cornerbacks in the second window, one of whom can also play nickel and compete with Corey Couch, who I think is fine. But what you have here is you have 2 great safeties, James Williams and Cam Kinchins. You're going to wind up with 2 starters out of that portal, or out of those portal guys, probably Devontae Brown, probably Jaden Davis, even though he wasn't real good at Oklahoma last year stat-wise. And then you just got guys, who are going to have to figure it out and maybe be able to battle for first team. Because remember, last year as we sat here at this same time of year, we said Darryl Porter Jr. is going to start opposite Tyreek Stevenson. And then TJ Ivey wound up beating out Darryl Porter Jr., and Darryl Porter Jr. did not look good when he did get opportunities. So in a situation like this, there's just a lot of unknowns. There could be a reason Jaden Davis faltered really badly, even though he started a ton of games at Oklahoma. He just really wasn't good. He wasn't productive. He didn't get a lot of interceptions. Opposing quarterbacks targeted him and completed a lot of passes for a lot of yards against him. Maybe Miami coaches are giving him a chance here, but maybe they're going to say at the end of the day, like, yeah, he was a 4-star year. He's an area guy, but he doesn't have whatever it is, the technique, the speed, his eyes wander, whatever it is. That eye discipline thing is so important with cornerbacks and with safeties. And Kevin Steele talked about it nonstop last year, but it's an issue. And he acknowledged it was an issue for the entire defense last year, and it kept on causing problems on defense last year. I don't know that it gets fixed immediately because you hire a new coach when the last coach was a veteran who was hammering on it constantly. So this was a defensive backs group that, even with 2 NFL draft picks in Stevenson and Ivey, and with those 2 starters, right, Cam Kinchins, an All-American, and James Williams, this defensive backs group ranked, I want to say, number 79 in passing yards allowed, and I think it was number 101 in defensive passing efficiency. Those are not good numbers, even with a high level. And now you've got question marks. You've got a new defense that's putting even more pressure on the cornerback, boundary cornerbacks, a defense that likes to leave them one-on-one down the field so that safeties can blitz, linebackers can blitz, so they can confuse the opposing offense. And I don't know if these guys are good enough to hold up. This is the most important position starting-wise, okay? And the depth, again, the depth is a question mark. We don't know. You know, linebacker, you know Francisco Malago is going to be good. You can hope that Basant is going to be decent. And you know, you got those two guys. It's honestly, they only run two linebackers a lot of the time anyway. So that's okay. Defensive line, we talked about the starters. They'll be fine. I think that's the strongest starting group on the defense. But at cornerback, it might be great, it might be average, or it might be terrible. And if I had to guess right now, I'd say it's somewhere between average and terrible, you know, just because I think, you know, they weren't happy with Devontae Brown in the spring, and he's probably their best cornerback. You know, they were saying that he can cover deep routes really well, but the intermediate stuff, he was struggling. Like, that's what I kept hearing over and over again. He was struggling on those routes when, you know, when these receivers make sharp cuts, he's like not sticking with them, and that's not good, right? Yeah. So, you know, I don't know what to tell people. It is somewhat of an unknown. They desperately need 2 to 3 of these boundary corners to step up in a big way. I was telling someone the other day, I really think that this is going to be one of those weird years where the offense is actually really good, but the defense is going to be the issue. And I keep saying it keeps going one way or the other. If you look over the last 19 years of failure, I swear, I have to look at this at some point, but I would guess that 18 of those years, the offense was decent and the defense was bad, or the defense was decent and the offense was bad. It's just they can never get it connected at the exact same time, where both units are above average by a wide margin, by a significant level. Maybe this will be the year. You know, we can hope. It's the preseason. Everything's going to be fine, everybody. It's going to be a great year. They're going to win 7 games. It's going to be awesome. That's 2 more than last year. What are people going to complain about? 7 wins is great.
Well, I'm going to go out on the limb here and say I think that it is a deficiency in a problematic situation. When you talk about backups at defensive back, there's just not a lot of proven, you know, we talked about the cornerbacks, but the safeties, I mean, you know, your backups, Markeith Williams, Caleb Spencer, Brian Ballum. I mean, who has proven anything amongst that group? Absolutely nobody. I mean, so I don't know, man. It's this is definitely the whole defensive side of the football, and depth is a definite issue going into training camp. So developing depth there will be a big initiative starting at the beginning of August. They have to try to develop some second teamers for sure before they get into the early part of September. If you like this show, you like our YouTube channel, hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. It helps us with the algorithms at YouTube. And more so than anything, if you're not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, please come join our community. Join our website. Your subscriptions allow us to do what we do every day to enhance your fan experience. So for Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you once again, everybody. We'll see you next time.